Welcome back to Divine Decoded, your channel for unpacking the wisdom and wonder of sacred text. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We're hoping to reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of February.
Awesome.
Today, we're diving deep into Exodus, chapters 11 through 20. This is where things get intense. After enduring plague after plague, the Israelites are about to break free from Egypt. But Pharaoh's heart is hard, and one final, devastating blow is about to come down.
Yeah, it's remarkable how this final plague, the death of the firstborn, truly highlights the power dynamics at play. Exodus 11:5 says, "And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts."
Wow.
This plague impacts everyone, from Pharaoh to the lowliest slave, and even the livestock. It's a judgment that demonstrates God's absolute authority over all creation.
It's such a powerful image. The Egyptians plunged into mourning and chaos, while the Israelites experience a protected silence. It really drives home God's promise to shield those who are faithful.
This event isn't just about raw power. It's targeted and deliberate, highlighting God's justice and the distinction he makes between those who oppress and those who remain faithful.
And God provides a way out for his people with the instructions for Passover in verse 12.1. This is such a pivotal moment, not only for the Israelites, but for all who understand the importance of this foreshadowing. God gives very specific instructions. Select an unblemished lamb, mark your doorposts with its blood, and eat the meal quickly, ready to leave Egypt.
The symbolism of the blood is incredibly profound. It's a sign of protection, separating the Israelites from the Egyptians. In the Christian faith, this foreshadows the sacrifice of Jesus, whose blood offers atonement and redemption.
Right. And Passover isn't just a one-time event, it becomes a lasting ordinance. This tradition, this reminder of God's deliverance and faithfulness, continues to shape beliefs and practices today.
Absolutely. Even the act of fleeing Egypt itself holds so much meaning. The Israelites leave in a hurry, taking unleavened bread because there's no time to wait for it to rise. And then we see the instruction in verse 12.35 to ask for silver and gold from the Egyptians. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians.
This spoiling of the Egyptians has led to some interesting interpretations.
Yeah, some see it as reparations, a way to reclaim some of what was taken during centuries of forced labor. Others view it as symbolically stripping Egypt of its power, emphasizing God's triumph over their oppressors.
As their journey continues, God establishes practices that further shape their identity. In verse 13.1, there's the command to consecrate the firstborn males to the Lord. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. This includes a redemption process, reminding us of God's role in their lives.
Consecration is a powerful act of dedication, recognizing that God is the source of life. It serves as a constant reminder of their deliverance and obligation to live according to his will.
Yeah, it all ties back to Passover. The firstborn were spared, and now they are dedicated back to God. It's a beautiful cycle of gratitude and surrender, acknowledging that their very lives are a gift.
Exactly. That sense of gratitude and dependence becomes even more important as they face the challenge of crossing the Red Sea. Exodus 14 is dramatic chaos. Pharaoh changes his mind, pursues the Israelites, and they find themselves trapped between the sea and the Egyptian army. It's a desperate situation.
The imagery is incredible. The pillar of cloud and fire, the parting of the waters, the Egyptians drowning in the waves. This story has captured imaginations for centuries.
It's more than just a good story, though. It's a demonstration of God's power over nature and his faithfulness to his people. He literally makes a way where there is none, reminding us that he can deliver us from the most impossible situations.
And such a miraculous escape leads to celebration. Exodus 15 gives us the songs of Moses and Miriam, expressing their praise, thanksgiving, and awe at God's power. These aren't just emotional outbursts, but deliberate acts of worship.
These songs are powerful, filled with vivid imagery and a deep understanding of God's character. They're not just celebrating victory, they're reinforcing the Israelites' identity as God's chosen people, bound to him by covenant and delivered by his grace.
But as we know, the journey doesn't end there. The honeymoon phase is over, and the Israelites face the realities of the wilderness.
And their reaction is, well, let's just say relatable. They begin to grumble. Bitter water, hunger, thirst, it all becomes a cause for complaint and doubt. It's a reminder that even after witnessing miracles, we can lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's almost comical, right? They've just experienced the most incredible series of miracles and they're back to complaining. It shows how easily we forget, take things for granted, and struggle to trust, even when we've seen God's provision firsthand.
But God, being patient, continues to provide. He sweetens the water at Marah, sends manna and quail for their hunger, and brings water from a rock at Rephidim. These aren't just physical provisions, they are reminders of his constant care.
There's a fascinating detail here. God establishes the Sabbath through the provision of manna. In Exodus 16:23 it says, "And he said unto them, This is that which the Lord hath said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seed that ye will seed, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning." They were to gather twice as much manna on the 6th day, because there would be none on the 7th, the Sabbath. This marks the beginning of the Sabbath as a day of rest, ordained by God.
The Sabbath is more than just a day off. It's a pause woven into creation itself. God is setting a rhythm of work and rest, reminding us to make space for dependence on him.
Then we have the battle with the Amalekites in Exodus 17. We see Joshua stepping up as a military leader, but it's Moses' role that's truly fascinating. He doesn't fight, he prays, standing on a hilltop with his hands raised.
This image of Moses with raised hands becomes a powerful symbol of prayer and dependence on God for success, not just in battle, but in all aspects of life.
It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful action is prayer. It's about aligning ourselves with God's will and seeking his strength. And we see the importance of community support when Aaron and Hur hold up Moses' weary arms. We need each other to stay strong in our faith.
Speaking of wise counsel, the next chapter introduces Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Observing Moses' overwhelming workload, he offers some practical advice. He suggests delegating authority, appointing capable leaders to share the burden.
Jethro's advice is about sustainable systems, recognizing that trying to do everything alone leads to burnout. It's about distributing leadership and empowering others.
It's fascinating that Jethro isn't an Israelite, yet his wisdom is accepted and implemented. It shows a willingness to learn from those outside our own communities. Wise counsel can come from unexpected places.
And then comes the arrival at Mount Sinai in Exodus 19. The Israelites reach their destination, the place where God reveals his law and establishes his covenant with them. But there's a lot of preparation involved first.
The imagery here is striking, with thunder, lightning, smoke, and a trembling mountain, emphasizing the awe-inspiring presence of God. It highlights the need for reverence and humility when preparing to encounter the divine.
It's like preparing for a monumental event. The ritual purification, the boundaries set, the sense of anticipation and solemnity, they are being prepared to stand in the presence of the Almighty, and it's not something to be taken lightly.
This focus on ritual purity and boundaries underscores the need to approach the sacred with respect and intentionality. It reminds us that encountering God is transformative. We must set aside our worldly concerns and prepare ourselves mentally, spiritually, and even physically.
And then finally, we come to the heart of it all. The 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. These aren't just random rules. They form the foundation of a just society, outlining our responsibilities to God and each other. They cover worship, respect for authority, protecting life, property, and relationships.
The 10 Commandments represent a covenant between God and his people. Agreeing to these principles marks a unique relationship with God based on obedience, trust, and responsibility.
Even for those who aren't religious, the 10 Commandments have had a profound impact on legal systems and ethical frameworks around the world. They speak to universal principles of justice, fairness, and respect for human dignity.
It's fascinating how the giving of the law is framed. The people are terrified by the thunder, lightning, and smoke, begging Moses to speak to them directly. They are afraid to hear God's voice themselves. It highlights the sheer power and weight of these pronouncements.
It's such a powerful image. They desire a relationship with God, yet they are terrified by his power. It speaks of the complexity of faith, the desire for closeness, and the simultaneous awareness of our human limitations.
And God, recognizing their fear, reassures them through Moses. He says in Exodus 20:20, "Fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not." This suggests that fear isn't meant to paralyze. It's meant to motivate us to live righteously, choosing obedience out of reverence for God.
And finally, we have instructions on worship. Exodus 20.22-26 provides guidelines for creating altars and engaging in proper worship. It emphasizes approaching God with reverence and humility. avoiding anything that might profane the sacred.
These instructions emphasize intentionality in worship. It's not about elaborate rituals, but about approaching God with a sincere heart, recognizing His holiness and our need for His grace.
So in these chapters of Exodus, we've seen the Israelites go from slavery to freedom, from near destruction to the foot of Mount Sinai. We've witnessed God's power, provision, and guidance, the struggles with obedience and faith, and the beginning of a covenant based on law and worship. It's a story that reminds us of our own need for deliverance, guidance, and a foundation for our lives.
It's incredible how this section of Exodus sets the stage for so much of what unfolds in the rest of the Old Testament. These events establish patterns and principles that shape the entire Israelite narrative.
Absolutely. We're witnessing the birth of a nation, the formation of their religious and legal identity. It's fascinating to see the seeds of later developments being planted right here.
For example, the Ten Commandments aren't just a static set of rules. They become the basis for a complex system of laws and interpretations that evolve over time, influencing Jewish legal and ethical traditions for centuries to come.
It's amazing how these ancient texts continue to have a profound impact on our world today. We see echoes of the Ten Commandments in legal systems, moral codes, and ethical debates across cultures and religions.
The concept of covenant, so central to the Exodus story, becomes a defining theme throughout the Old Testament. This idea of a binding agreement between God and His people, with both rights and responsibilities, shapes our understanding of how God interacts with humanity.
And it's not always an easy relationship, is it? The Israelites constantly test God's patience, grumbling, disobeying, and even turning to other gods. Even with a covenant, human nature is prone to wander.
That tension between God's faithfulness and human fallibility is a constant thread in the biblical narrative. It's a story of grace and judgment, rebellion and forgiveness, and ultimately God's enduring love for His people.
It's a story we can all relate to, right? We know what it's like to make promises, to commit wholeheartedly and then fall short. We struggle, we doubt, we get distracted, and sometimes we just mess up.
But the Exodus story offers hope. Even when we fail, God doesn't abandon us. He continues to pursue us, offer second chances, and guide us back to righteousness.
As we reflect on these chapters, what are some key takeaways we can apply to our lives today? What lessons can we learn from this ancient story of deliverance, law, and covenant?
One crucial lesson is the power of remembrance. The Israelites are constantly reminded to remember what God has done for them: the plagues, the Passover, the Red Sea, the provisions in the wilderness. These events aren't just historical facts. They are meant to shape their identity and inform their choices.
It's like they're building a mental and spiritual scrapbook of God's faithfulness. When they face challenges or temptations, they can look back and be encouraged, remembering that God has been faithful before and He will be faithful again.
Exactly. And this practice of remembrance isn't just for the ancient Israelites. It's something we can cultivate in our own lives. Taking time to reflect on God's blessings, both big and small, can shift our perspective and strengthen our faith in times of difficulty.
It's about developing that attitude of gratitude, recognizing God's hand in our lives, even when things are tough.
Absolutely. Another key takeaway is the importance of obedience. The Ten Commandments, the instructions on Passover, the Sabbath, the building of altars, all of these point to the importance of aligning our lives with God's will. But obedience isn't just about blindly following rules, is it? It's about understanding the heart behind the commands, recognizing that God's laws are ultimately for our good. They are designed to protect, guide, and help us flourish.
You're exactly right. True obedience flows from a heart that trusts God, recognizing His wisdom and authority. It's not about earning favor or avoiding punishment. It's about living in right relationship with God and each other.
And that's where the concept of covenant becomes so important. It's not just about following rules. It's about entering a relationship with God based on mutual love, trust, and commitment.
That relationship is beautifully illustrated in the imagery of Exodus. God leads His people with a pillar of cloud and fire, provides for their needs, protects them, and reveals His will through Moses. It's a picture of intimacy, guidance, and provision.
But it's a two-way street. The Israelites are expected to respond to God's love with their own love, obedience, and worship. It's a dynamic relationship, a dance between divine initiative and human response. Precisely. And that dance, with all its complexities and challenges, is something we navigate in our own faith journeys. We experience God's love and grace, we respond with our imperfect efforts, and we learn and grow along the way.
So as we move on to the next section of Exodus, we'll see how this covenant relationship unfolds, with all its highs and lows, its faithfulness and rebellion, its triumphs and tragedies. It's a story that continues to speak to the depths of the human experience, reminding us of who we are, who God is, and how we're meant to live in relationship with Him.
It's important to remember that this section of Exodus has implications that extend beyond the Israelites. The principles we see here, especially in the Ten Commandments, have resonated throughout history and across cultures, influencing legal systems, ethical frameworks, and societal norms.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. These aren't just ancient rules for a specific group of people. They speak to universal truths about human nature, our relationship with God, and how we should live in community with one another.
Think about the commandment to honor your father and your mother. This principle of respecting authority, recognizing the importance of family structure and caring for elders, has been foundational to societies throughout time.
It's not just about blind obedience to any authority figure, right? It's about recognizing the value of those who came before us, those who shaped our lives and communities. It's about acknowledging their wisdom and experience.
Exactly. And this respect for authority goes beyond family. It extends to leaders in all areas of life: teachers, mentors, those in government, anyone entrusted with guiding and protecting society. Order and justice depend on a degree of deference to those in authority.
Then we have the commandments against murder, adultery, theft, and bearing false witness. These are truly the cornerstones of a just and peaceful society. They protect life, property, relationships, and the very integrity of truth.
They certainly are. These commandments speak to the sanctity of human life and the importance of living with integrity. They establish boundaries to protect individuals and communities from harm and create a framework for trust and cooperation to flourish.
And let's not forget that last commandment, you shall not covet. This one gets to the core of human desire, doesn't it? It challenges us to be content with what we have, to avoid envy and greed, and to find fulfillment in something greater than material possessions or what others have.
It's a powerful reminder that true contentment doesn't come from accumulating more things, but from aligning our desires with God's will. It's about understanding that our worth isn't tied to what we own or achieve, but to our relationship with God and our place in His creation.
So how do we apply all of this to our lives today, in a world that often feels very different from the events of Exodus? How can these stories, these ancient lessons, speak to our modern challenges in our search for meaning and purpose?
I think one of the most powerful messages of Exodus is that God is a God of deliverance. He sees the suffering of His people, He hears their cries, and He acts to free them from oppression.
And that deliverance isn't always a physical event, is it? Sometimes it's emotional, mental, or spiritual. God delivers us from fear, anxiety, unhealthy patterns, broken relationships, anything that holds us back from living freely and fully.
That's so true. And just as He provided for the Israelites in the wilderness, God continues to provide for us today. He gives us what we need: food, shelter, resources, relationships. But He also provides guidance, wisdom, and strength for facing whatever comes our way.
And that guidance often comes in unexpected ways, doesn't it? Through a conversation with a friend, a passage in Scripture, a quiet moment of reflection, a sudden clear sense of direction. God is always speaking, always guiding, if we're willing to listen.
Absolutely. And just as He established a covenant with the Israelites, God invites us into a covenant relationship with Him today. It's a relationship built on love, grace, and mutual commitment. We respond to His love with our love, our obedience, and our worship, and He, in turn, continues to guide, protect, and provide for us.
It's definitely a journey. There will be moments of doubt, times of testing, seasons that feel like wandering in the wilderness. But Exodus reminds us that we are not alone in those times. God is with us every step of the way, leading us toward a place of ultimate fulfillment and rest.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Exodus, chapters 11 through 20, I want to leave you with this. What are the Egypts in your life? What holds you captive? What prevents you from experiencing true freedom and abundance? And how can you partner with God to break free from those chains and step into the fullness of life He has planned for you?
That's a powerful question for us all to consider. We encourage you to share your own reflections in the comments below. Tell us how these stories from Exodus are speaking to you today. But if you found this deep dive meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others. We're on a mission to reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of February, and we can't do it without your help. Thanks for joining us on Divine Decoded. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the wisdom and wonder of sacred texts.